When we send our young men and women into harm's way, we have a solemn obligation not to fudge the numbers or shade the truth about why they're going, to care for their families while they're gone, to tend to the soldiers upon their return, and to never, ever go to war without enough troops to win the war, secure the peace, and earn the respect of the world. Now let me be clear. Let me be clear. We have real enemies in the world. These enemies must be found, they must be pursued, and they must be defeated. John Kerry knows this, and just as Lieutenant Kerry did not hesitate to risk his life to protect the men who served with him in Vietnam, President Kerry will not hesitate one moment to use our military might to keep America safe and secure. John Kerry believes in America.
With the promise of taking the mortgage payment at a high interest rate for 1 year, with the promise of being able to refinance and then to come out of it. So with this being said, I would like to hear from you, Senator Obama. How do you feel about the prepayment penalties, and then also the I know it's yield to spread premium, and I'd like to know if you would join on board with us to ban these things.
Well, obviously I would want to see the details of your proposals, and I'm sure that we have a chance to talk later with our staffs and we've already been talking to you. But the basic principle is this. Number one, it doesn't sound like you were adequately informed of some of these provisions. So you went in thinking you could borrow against your equity for a year and then pay back the amount that you had borrowed. Or, I want to make sure I get your story straight. You went in, you took out a home equity loan, right? And the interest rate was established. You knew it was going to be a high interest rate, but you thought that it was only going to last for a year. And it turns out that it's lasting much longer. Is that right?
The problem is that we have a prepayment penalty. So I could get out of the loan, the high interest loan, if I could come up with $10,000 to pay the prepayment penalty.
You want to refinance.
Correct.
And get a lower interest rate than you currently have. The problem is that you got to prepayment penalties. And I think that the problem we have generally is that most of the time borrowers are not getting the information that they need ahead of time. People are told you've got these low rates, or you can cash in and get $20,000, $30,000, and you've got equity in your home. And people aren't aware that there are prepayment penalties in place there. They're not going to be able to refinance their home. But the minute you sign those papers, you're locked in for 10, 15, 20 years of payment and unsustainable mortgage payments. So this is why what we've done is we've said, first of all, we're going to tighten the disclosure standards that apply. Number two, that we're going to have a home scoring system so that you're going to be able to compare loans the same way you compare gas mileage when you go to buy a car. You're going to have a standardized rating system that says this loan means you're going to be making this many payments, this is how much it's going to cost, these are the prepayment penalties, these are the fees involved, so that everybody knows exactly what they're getting into. My general view is that prepayment penalties, whether it's on mortgages or credit cards, are a bad idea. But there may be circumstances in which they make sense. That's why I want to take a look at the bill that you put forward to see how far it goes in terms of eliminating the use of prepayment penalties. Certainly, if people aren't aware of prepayment penalties when they go into the loan, then they shouldn't be locked into those kinds of rates. Okay. Yes.
Senator Obama and Laura Graham have done foreclosure prevention for many years, plus the lender control for many years. One of the things that I'd like to know is what is your appetite for regulatory oversight of these agencies? When banking deregulation happened in 1989, it became free for all. Mortgage companies have never been regulated. If we had the regulatory oversight that we used to have in those days, we wouldn't have some of the problems that we have now. Plus, in terms of some of what she said, some of this disclosure issues, there's a thing called the truth in lending statement, which discloses those things. They don't disclose them in layman's language.
Exactly.
So the disclosure aspect of it needs to be made more fun.
Well, you're exactly right. Most people just aren't aware of what they're getting into. And, you know, when they sign up for the mortgage, I remember when I got my mortgage, I'm a lawyer. You know, they're always there are about 15 sheets of forms that you're just kind of going through. And people don't have a sense of what exactly all this stuff means, and nobody's explaining to them. That's why we want to standardize this home scoring system that is standardized in layman's terms so that people can just look at it and say, okay, this is exactly what this means. These are my monthly payments. This is where my interest rate could end up going, and that's what that would mean if interest rates go up. So that people understand very clearly what they're getting themselves into. Now, I think that oversight and regulation are absolutely vital. Part of what happened here was the mortgage lending industry got very fast and loose in terms of the loans that they could give. And it worked just fine as long as housing prices were going up. When housing prices started going down or even stabilizing, as invariably they were going to, then suddenly people found that they couldn't refinance. Foreclosures started increasing. A lot of these mortgage lenders, they had already dumped these the original loans that they made. They bundled them and sold them on Wall Street, so you didn't even know who it is that actually owned your mortgage. And it is now hurting a lot of people, including people who have very conventional mortgages and have always paid their payments. It's not just people who got in over their heads. You've got a lot of people who have been making their payments for a long time, and suddenly are finding themselves hurt. Or property values have gone down. And once you get underwater, meaning that the value of your house is actually less than the value of your mortgage, that is a very difficult thing for you to justify. Being stuck in a situation where you're paying for a loan that is worth less than the house. And that's increasing the temptation for people to just walk away. And obviously they lose all their equity, but that's bad for the community as well, and ultimately that's bad for the land. That's why disclosure and regulation is not anti-market, it's pro-market. The more that we have a transparent and accountable system, the market works well, borrowers borrow what they should, lenders lend what they should, payments will be made, and everybody's better off. But we've had an administration that frankly has been anti-regulation, and we haven't adapted to this new financial environment where there are a lot of different kinds of lending operations. It used to be you got your mortgage, you went to the bank. The banker was looking in your neighborhood and knew who you were. And they were going to just stick that mortgage in a file. And so there was a much closer contact and less likelihood that lenders would be pushing loans that couldn't be repaid, because ultimately, if you couldn't be repaid, they were going to they would be stuck with that house and they would be able to resell it on Wall Street and get their money out and then not worry about what happens over the long term. That's changed, and that's why we need stronger regulation and oversight than we have right now.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome to Las Vegas, Nevada once again. It's always a pleasure to see my daughter, Andrea. My wife just recently graduated from the UNLV nursing program, and after 4 long years, no time off, it's the accelerated program. When we started to make the sacrifice and say, hey, let's get you through college, just make it happen. $95,000 late, $45,000 in debt. It seemed back then that the house dream was there. It's like, oh, we made it to college, we can make it happen. But now that we've gotten to the end of this, in this housing crisis, now the dream seems to have gotten further away from us because now we don't know who to trust. We don't trust the lenders, we don't trust the banks. Now the credit people are, no, we're in debt. So what can we do to increase to get that house closer to us? Because now we feel that it's further away than it was when we started the education.
Well, first of all, you're dealing with a whole other set of problems, which have to do with debt from going to school. So part of what I want to do is to set up a $4,000 tuition credit every student every year, so that they are burdened with less debt when they graduate. Because right now we've got a lot of young people who are. We've got a lot of young people who basically have a mortgage but don't have a house.
Yeah.
They have a mortgage, the equivalent of a mortgage in terms of their student loans, their student debt. So we've got to drive that down. And the other thing that we're going to have to do, part of the reason that we want to pass this law to help stabilize the housing market is that's the only way to stabilize the credit market. If we can stabilize the credit market, then banks will start lending again, and it will be easier then to start getting mortgages. I mean, right now, everybody's very tight in terms of their credit standards, and even people who legitimately should be able to refinance or should be able to get their first loan, they're having trouble because the banks and financial institutions are all paranoid about giving out loans to people. So that's why it's important for us to pass the proposal where the borrower and the lender come together. The borrower essentially says, in exchange for getting a fixed rate mortgage that is stable and that they can pay, they're going to be willing, as the housing prices to go back up, to give a little bit of equity back to the lender. The lender, they agree to reduce the principal or to convert from an adjustable rate to a fixed rate. So they lose a little bit of the money that they're expecting, the profits that they're expecting, but at least they will be able to assure that the borrowers will make the payments. And if we can do that with enough money to stabilize the housing market, then over time it starts going back up again, banks start wanting to get into the market again, and you will be in a position hopefully to get your home. In the meantime, we just got to make sure we pay off your student loans. And one of the things we're looking at is to see what we can do to help people who have heavy student loan burdens to consolidate their loans at lower interest rates.
I happen to be in the mortgage business. I am one of the few loan officers that attends the signing for my clients. And we actually go through the note and the requirements of prepayment penalties. One of the things I'd like to suggest is if we take that, maybe a one-page checklist that includes if there's a prepayment penalty and so forth, if it's an adjustable rate. Take it out of the hands of the loan officer and have the actual escrow officer notarize that they covered that with this borrower. Then now you've got a little bit more control. I make sure that all my clients understand. The other thing is the banks are doing short sales, so they're willing to walk away with less money. Why can't they offer people who need to get into the same opportunity? They're willing to take a short sale and let them refinance at that lower rate as well. And that goes back to what you're talking about with the bill is splitting some of that. So I think you guys are on point with that. Now, the biggest thing I want to talk about here in Nevada, we have a large percentage of borrowers who are stated income. They park cars, they work with tips, taxi cab drivers, so forth. We have a bill now in the state that basically makes it very difficult for an investor to, well, not difficult, but they're afraid to do stated income loans because it criminalizes them. So there are a ton of borrowers out there who basically cannot get a loan, can't qualify because we can't go stated income unless their loan to value is, say, 70% or less. And so we have a ton of folks who are in these adjustable loans. I can't help because we can't go stated. So basically you have a problem with refi, but you also have a problem with the borrower because now people who do work that have to go stated cannot get that loan for a new home.
That's an interesting point. And that obviously is going to be more problem here in Nevada than just about any state in the country because so many people are involved in the hospitality industry. Just to make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about. When you say stated income, part of the problem that led to the housing crisis was a lot of mortgage lenders were not looking for proof of income. They were just basically saying, you just tell us what you're worth, we'll just write that down. Nobody was checking. And so there were a bunch of people who maybe got in over their heads. Right. So I want to make sure that you clarify what exactly is the legislation that's being proposed and how would that impact the population of Utah.
Basically, I'm not saying there isn't any oversight, definitely. I'd like to be able to use bank statements. You see the money going into their bank account. So you see the tips that they're earning, and it's going to be in a deposit regularly, weekly, whatever. But we can't use that income because we can't use the bank statement. If we do, there are a few lenders who will allow us to use a bank statement program, but the rates are high, 10 or 11%. So that does us no good. So I'm not saying no regulatory, but
is the legislative proposal that the bank statement would just not be sufficient, unless you have pay stubs that prove that you are making a certain income, and they're not going to take into account tips and things like that under the law.
Loan officer does not do their due diligence and check that bank statement, now they could be sued or basically criminalized, as well as the investor who gave the money. So.
Well, we've got a couple of state legislators here. Horsford, I hope you heard that. People are concerned about this issue of state income. I suspect you've already heard about it. But I think the general principle that we want to make sure that people are counseled accurately about stating their income accurately so that they can make a clear assessment of what they can afford is important. Because what is true, I mean, now in fairness, to the lenders, we've got to admit that there's some borrowers whose basic attitude was, you know what, I don't have to put any money down, and I'm just going to go ahead and take the biggest house or the best house I can get. And it turned out that they couldn't afford the house they bought. And I want to make sure that people are protected by assuring full disclosure and they've got the best information available. But I also want to make sure that borrowers have good information so they can make responsible decisions and not get it over their heads. And when you have no obligation to put any money down, and there's an interest rate at the front end that's really low, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's not going to stay low. Right. And at some point you're going to end up having a problem. So you should ask questions because there's no such thing as a free lunch or a free house. So that's what we're doing. I'm just curious. Do we have any other counselors in the room? Good, because I'd like to get some stories in terms of what people are saying in terms of what kinds of problems are people coming to you with, and what do you think would be the most important steps that we can take based on what you've seen?
Well, my name is Amanda Abrams, I'm a senior housing counselor for NIV Housing Counseling in DC. And one of the problems that I'm seeing is that the lenders and servicers are really not doing enough. Number one, it's taking so long to get any kind of loan modification or any kind of loan workout done. They can take up to 60 days or more. And meanwhile, the clock is still ticking on the foreclosure process. And then another thing that is happening, I have several clients here in the audience. One of my clients is a senior citizen who refinanced his home a couple of years ago, and he was put on an adjustable rate program, and he also has a balloon payment. His adjustable rate is adjusting every 6 months, and when his loan reset, his payment went up by $300, which has made his home now unaffordable. He is the only one who's working in his home. His wife is disabled. So when we called his loan servicer, and we told him that, and by the way, he has not defaulted to date, and we told them about his problem, the first thing that they said, well, he needs to sell his home. Well, that's not an option. This man has been in his home for
for many years, that's not an option. So when we asked them if they would roll the interest rate back to what it was before that 300 payment hit him, no, they can only take it down by maybe a quarter or a half point, which does nothing to help him. His payment is still unaffordable. So basically, we have not been able to help him. We have referred him to lenders out in the community, but because his house is upside down, there's not enough equity in the property, he can't refinance. And I think he's in trouble here in the audience. Then there's another one of my clients, Mr. David here. It's like there's no communication in the offices with these lenders. He had worked out a loan modification. In fact, the representative for the mortgage company called him and said, we need to know if you have any upfront money so that we can do your loan modification. We are pretty sure that we're going to be able to.
Give us the truth. Part 2. Give us the truth. For every email, for every phone call, for everybody that came up to me at a show, here's part 2. Listen, yo, after the platinum Souls tour, I deal with Cross Movement. I said my goodbyes cause I had to fly back to St. Louis. I left the tour early for my first semester in school. I was exposed to so much truth that I had to choose between what I had learned and what I was taught to do. At my church home, my zone, I was so confused. The first Sunday morning back, it was like culture shock. Watching the shepherd and sheep explode like a soda pop. That had been shaking, they shaking over these shifty sermons. People spitting and shouting, but nobody's discerning. I left the building, my feelings were crushed, I felt forsaken. The one place I was supposed to come for restoration, in worship of a holy God and exalt him in praises. Spent the whole prayer time rebuking the Satan. Spent the whole sermon time just talking about money, while I was dying inside and spiritually